Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith, and it's One Child Abuse Survivor to Another Restoration. And glad to be here. 6:30 here in the morning, September 8th, Thursday morning. And just waking up, having a coffee. And hopefully you're having a good morning, too. Thanks, everybody who's been tuning into my shows and listening and taking the time to listen. And hopefully you're getting something out of them. I know that this information is helpful for me as a survivor of abuse. Just this morning reflection, looking at how I'm doing on my healing journey, and what are the positives, and what do I need to work on, and just looking at some information I find helpful. So, hopefully it's helping you out too. And but you want to do a safety checklist if you're a survivor of abuse. Make sure that you're safe enough to be listening this morning to anything like this. To make sure it's not going to trigger you or send you sort of backward in your healing journey. You really don't want that. Nobody does. And you want to make sure you're safe enough to listen. And if you don't know or you're not really sure how to judge, or how to gauge where you're at, whether you're safe enough to listen, there's a Safety First manual it's a Survivor to Thriver manual, actually, from ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, Survivor to Thriver manual. You can grab it from their website, and it's a free download, or you can just read it from the site, I think, on the web pages. And there's the chapter Safety First. It's the first chapter, and it's almost 60 pages long, and I always start the show out with this just to let people know that, that information is there. You want to make sure that you get it and you read it, and make sure you're safe enough to be listening or doing anything like this. If you're a survivor of abuse, just to make sure that you're not triggered, and that you're safe enough that that you won't hurt yourself or hurt somebody else or just have a miserable day. Nobody wants that, right? So make sure you get the information. And we'll get right into this morning reflection. How am I doing on my healing journey? This morning feeling pretty good. I'm just waking up, actually. This is heading towards the end of the week, so I'm already getting a little bit tired from working, and so haven't had much time to do anything really towards the stuff that I want to work on, which is the yoga and the breathing work and stuff like that. But eventually we'll get there. Otherwise, I think I'm doing pretty good and not doing too bad at all. Just trying to get organized, sort of get things situated, because I am so busy. I'm having to cram so much into a short period of time during the day, like most people. So, trying to work it out so that see if it works, it's workable. And so far, I'm just working on that. So trying to get organized from, time-wise, right? So that's always an issue, but as long as I just keep working at it, eventually it'll all work out. And this is really cool. I want to start this morning with this acronym from adults. It's HAVOCA, HAVOCA, Help for Adult Victims of Child Abuse, HAVOCA.org. They have this really interesting acronym that Cheryl put together, the lady that I guess is probably one of the main contributors, or maybe actually runs and basically owns that HAVOCA.org. I'm not sure, but her name is Cheryl. She put together this acronym, Adult Survivors of Sexual Abuse, but she said it's kind of good for anybody who's been abused, any type of abuse. Doesn't have to be sexual abuse or child sexual abuse. So it's interesting to look at. Yesterday's was Understand You're Not Alone in Your Journey to Heal. Adult survivors worldwide stand with you hand in hand, and counselors, too, are a valuable part of the healing process. So she says, don't be afraid to invest time with them in your life's journey. They are not judgmental. They are compassionate, caring people. And that's what we always hope for anyway. I've heard some stories that aren't quite exactly, haven't gone that way. People have had problems and trouble finding a good therapist or a good counselor, but have to keep looking, just keep looking, how you have rights, and, you can get those Survivor Bill of Rights from HAVOCA, and make sure that you know that you do have rights, and you have a right to find a counselor who can relate to you, right, and actually help you, right. So I know that's, for me, I have a right to do that, so that's awesome. This morning's is L for in the adult, right, L. Let your todays be filled with happiness, your tomorrows with visions of hope. Yesterday is already a dream, tomorrow is only a vision, but today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. That's awesome. Let your todays be filled with happiness, your tomorrows with visions of hope. Yesterday is already a dream, tomorrow is only a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. That's awesome. I like that. That's very good. Some days it's easier to do that than others, and I think that's the case for everybody. It doesn't have to be that somebody's a survivor of abuse, People around, people just have days that just they don't work out so well, and it's just hard to be happy in that. And but I think it's, if we remember these things, to keep that hope alive. That's what I do, and just try to live every day the best I can. Then then I think that's pretty good, because people struggle. It doesn't matter. Not everybody's it's not just the people who have been abused that struggle. We struggle with our own problems and in our own situations, but the rest of the world is struggling as well. And even if they weren't abused, so life is a struggle, and we can choose to either let it completely destroy us, or we can sort of, I want to call it, like, run the course and rise above, and that's what I'm working on doing. So I think that's interesting. I like what she has to say there. And we'll look at the inner child healing work that they've got there on their website too. This is mostly from Hovoka.org. I had no idea they had such great info on their website. I had looked on their website many years ago, saw they had some good information, but I really didn't look around the tabs very carefully. There's a survivor tab, and under that tab, you can go to Hovoka.org, HAVOCA.org, and they have a survivor tab at the top. And if you click on that, then you look over on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see they have just tons and tons of information for survivors of abuse, right? And they have this inner child tab, and we're looking at that inner child healing work, and we're looking at the third part, actually, called Learning to Love Ourselves, and that's where we left off yesterday. And so we'll pick right up where we left off. It says, we need to start saying no to the inner voices that are shaming and judgmental. The disease comes from a black and white, right and wrong perspective. It speaks in absolutes. For instance, quote unquote, a person might just hear this inner, shaming, judgmental voice in our own mind and thought system and thought processes saying, quote unquote, you always screw up, or quote unquote, you will never be a success, right? And she says, these are lies. We don't always screw up. We may never be a success according to our parents' or society's dysfunctional definition of success, but that is because our heart and soul do not resonate with those definitions. So that kind of success would be a betrayal of ourselves. So we need to consciously change our definitions so that we can stop judging ourselves against someone else's screwed up value system. That's interesting. I think that's very true. Like, that's what a lot of abuse survivors have heard. These horrible things. In our life, whether during childhood or in our adult lives. From abusers or abusive type people throwing their abuse at us, which really is, it's a disease, and then that stays in our mind. And if we believe it, and we actually, because it's very traumatic to be abused like that, then these things stay in our mind, and then that inner critical parent, our inner voices, later on as an adult, trying to heal and trying to move forward in our healing journey, we may still hear this stuff come up. I was told I was worthless, so that always comes up. You're just worthless, or you're this or you're that. These really these shaming, harsh words, that float around in my mind, especially when something goes wrong or I've done something wrong, made a mistake or something. Then all of a sudden it kind of throws me back into that whole, critical inner parent voice, which was my abuser's voice, who says that I'm worth nothing, that I'm useless, and that I'm just not going to make it or whatever. And these things, she's saying, this is such a lie, and I knew that, and especially as an adult, I knew that all those things that my abusers told me were lies. And I think what she has to say here is really interesting. It says we learn to relate to ourselves and all the parts of ourselves, emotions, everything, sexuality, etc., and life from a critical place of believing that something was wrong with us, and in fear that we would be punished if we didn't do life right, quote unquote right. Whatever we are doing or not doing, the disease can always find something to beat us up with. So they write here, I have 10 things on my to-do list today. I get 9 of them done, and the disease does not want me to give myself credit for what I have done, but instead beats me up for the one I didn't get done. And so whenever life gets too good, we get uncomfortable, and the disease jumps right in with fear and shame messages. And the critical parent voice keeps us from relaxing and enjoying life and from loving ourselves. That's very true for myself. I don't know about other people, but that's why when I started doing this show, I thought, I'm going to look at some positives instead of just being so hard on myself for not doing this, not doing that. Because, things are going to have to get put off. I'm not going to always do all of the things on my to-do list. Things happen and things come up, and so I'm going to look at the positives and think about what I need to work on, but not focus on the negatives, and but not just focus on just the positives either, but give myself credit for what I've done. And that's what I think, the biggest kind of, I don't know, progress that I've made in my life is I'm allowing myself to be okay with the fact that I'm not perfect and that I do make mistakes, and that, who's perfect, right? Nobody's perfect, and everybody makes mistakes, and everybody messes up, and everybody is in the same boat in that area. So for me to think that I have to be perfect, while it's okay that everybody else messes up, is ridiculous. But that's where I was, and that's because of the abuse that I suffered. It's like, well, I can't do anything wrong, right? Because if I do, I'm going to be abused, right? And so when somebody throws that in my face and tries to, now as an adult, in my adult life, in any kind of relationship, throws that in my face that, and it becomes abusive or toxic towards me because I've made a mistake, I'm just like looking at them going, look, I'm sure you make plenty of mistakes, so let's not be so harsh here. You know what I mean? I don't take that on as much as I used to when I was, even a younger adult, trying to deal with the aftermath of the abuse, and just, really horrific stuff this does to people, right? We're just kind of, we have to overcome these things, and really, in order to do that, we have to know what we need to work on, And for myself, I had to stop listening to that inner critical voice that was telling me these horrible things that were not true. They were lies, and that was the shaming, judgmental, diseased voice of my abusers from so long ago, just hanging around, in my head. And at some point, I have to make a decision to not listen to that inner critical parent voice that just shames me and makes me feel horrible about myself, right? And I have to start listening to the other voice from within, which is the voice of truth, the inner truth that says, no, I am just as worthy as anybody else out there, and I make mistakes, but I make mistakes like everybody else, and it's okay. I don't have to be perfect, and I don't have to do everything right all the time. And people do make mistakes. And if there's world in a room for other people, there's room in the world for other people and their mistakes, then there's room in the world for me and mine. And that's just how I feel about it. I'm like, look, you guys can all mess up, and it's okay, and the world isn't shut down. So that means when I mess up, it's okay, and the world doesn't shut down. I have just as much right to make a mistake as everybody else does. See, I'm tired of the people trying to put perfection on people, but it's okay that they mess up. Right? It just makes me a little bit grumpy, slightly grumpy that the world is actually very mentally ill and just thinks these things. It's okay that I mess up, but not okay for you. And that's not right. It's not right to do to anybody. But as an abuse survivor, it's incredibly wrong because people, who haven't been abused don't know where we're coming from. And they don't know the amount of damage done, to our psyches, to our very inner core being, right? And then this, there's what they're saying here is very true. Whenever life gets too good, we, quite often abuse survivors, right? We get uncomfortable. The disease jumps right in with fear and shame messages. If things get too comfortable, all of a sudden, well, we don't deserve that, But I don't consciously think that. Maybe unconsciously, subconsciously, some level of myself might think that way. The critical parent voice keeps us from relaxing and enjoying life, from loving ourselves. It's not like just to say, oh, well, I don't need that, it's not that I say, oh, I don't deserve that, right? Even though as a child I was told I didn't deserve to live. I didn't have the right to life, and that I should have died, right? So horrible, horrible things that my abusers told me. And that, I took that on, and then as an adult really was always on this self-destructive path, really. And even just always, suicidal ideation and things like this. And just this inner voice that says, I don't deserve anything, so why would I deserve to enjoy life? Why would I love myself, right? And this critical parent voice or whatever, these abuser voices within ourselves, even could be something coming from us, right? Keeps us from relaxing and enjoying life and from loving ourselves. I think that's really interesting, what they have to say about that. So we'll pick up the rest of this article, look at some of it tomorrow morning. And you can grab that at havoca.org. It's very interesting. Today, positive reinforcement. What are we doing right in our daily walk? Looking at the positives instead of just always the negatives. Yeah, because I could say, well, I didn't get this done, and I didn't get this done, and this and this and this. Well, what did I do that was, my daily walk that was good? Well, I got out and got some exercise yesterday, which was good. I actually had to run errands, which I don't have a vehicle, and I actually did some walking yesterday, got some fresh air, some sunshine, and took a nice walk because I had to go to a pet store to get my cat some of this food that's really kind of the only thing that she can eat that doesn't bother her stomach. And that was really good for me. I had to get out, get some fresh air, get some exercise. That was good. And other than that, I just worked all day and took care of my husband, and I did do some study and work towards my bachelor degree and stuff like that. I'm working on a bachelor of ministry right now. And so, I'm working on things, but I didn't get to do any of the stuff that I wanted to do, again, like the yoga, the rowing, and different things like that. But I did get some exercise, so that was good. And a positive reinforcement, like positive affirmation I can say for myself this morning is, yesterday's was I acknowledge my needs, right? This morning's is I can face my fears and work to overcome them. That's awesome. I can say throughout the day, I can face my fears and work to overcome them. That's right. Whatever fear it may be, fear of intimacy, fear of making a mistake, right? Fear of failure, fear of rejection. That's a big one for me. I have a problem with rejection. I was just rejected by my parents my whole life, and then rejected really by society who doesn't want to know me because, I'm an abuse survivor as well as my husband's terminally ill, and who wants to know somebody like me? So I face a lot of rejection, and I'm like, I'm working towards caring about myself and not caring about so much about what other people think, whether they like me or not, whether they want me in their life or not. I have to want myself in my life, and I have to care about myself. And really, at that point, it doesn't matter to me who cares about me and who wants me in their life. I really don't care. Now it's more about I'm learning to love myself and to know that I can exist on this planet, and I really don't need this codependent relationship with anybody that says I'm only okay as long as I have this in my life, or this person in my life, or this person does this for me, or this person does that for me, or that I'm only okay if this person's in my life, in this type of relationship or that type of relationship. It has using people in this codependent thing. I'm done with that. So it's like, as far as fear of rejection goes, I don't really care anymore whether people like me or not. It's kind of like I need to learn to love myself, and it doesn't matter to me what the world thinks. What matters to me is what I think. And, I try to be a good person to people. I do make mistakes, and like everybody else, right? We all do. And but on one hand, I don't base my happiness or my sense of peace and my sense of wholeness, really, or my sense of being here on the planet is not based on what other people think of me. I really don't care. So it doesn't really matter. So that's good. I'm glad I can be like that, because that sort of helps me with my issues of rejection. Because for so long, working, always trying to please my mother, especially my abusers, and then because I couldn't please them, actually rebelled against them, and rebelled against life and against myself, because I was never going to get what I needed. I was never going to get love, care, concern. It wasn't that I was just looking for, something that was unnecessary. I was looking for the very basic necessities that, for an emotionally well life as a child, right? To be loved, to be nurtured, to be cared about, not to be abused and harmed and, physically, emotionally, psychologically, sexually abused as a child, right? So I suffered all of it. And it's like, rejection, as an adult, I carried that into my adult life, and then I'll be people in certain whatever relationship, working relationships, personal relationships. I've got a real problem with rejection, so I generally leave first. And that way they don't get the opportunity to hurt me, because I leave. I leave before they even do hurt me. Whether they were going to hurt me or not, I don't know, but that's just the way I work. That's the way I operate. So I've had to really learn how to not do that and stand up for myself, and to assert myself and to say, look, no, I belong here just like everybody else. If you don't like me, I really don't care. Too bad. You know what I mean? It's too bad. Not everybody likes everybody, and I really don't care. So I'm learning how to face my fears, of especially rejection in that area, and fears of failure, And it takes time, to overcome these things, because it's a trial and error, keep going, sort of fall here and there, make mistakes, and have to get back up and say, okay, well, we're going to try again. We're just going to do this again, and I'm just going to keep working forward, moving forward, keep working on this stuff. So it's good, and I like that. I can face my fears and work to overcome them. That's awesome. Self-care, what am I doing, physically, spiritually, emotionally to care for myself? I'm really working on trying to, do things for my body, right, for my physical health really more than anything else right now, and just trying to work on getting some more exercise and taking better care of my body really because, emotionally, spiritually, I'm actually doing quite well. And so, it's I've let my body go in the process of working on all this other stuff. So and also trying to just do too much during the day and not taking any time to actually get some exercise, And I work 40 hours a week sitting down, attached to a headset, so no exercise there. And I smoke, and I just haven't really been taking care of myself. I haven't really put on that much weight or anything like that, thank God. But I've just been, letting my muscles go. I really haven't even been stretching. And the abuse that I suffered, the physical abuse and the child sexual abuse that I suffered as a child has really did take a toll on my body as well as several car accidents that I had. And so I need to be stretching. And I had to go to a chiropractor for like 5 years just to get things straightened out from the abuse that I suffered and from the car wreck, right? So some of it was abuse related, some was from the car accidents. And, just, different things like that. I really should be stretching and doing these things that are healthier for myself, right? And I don't, so that's what I'm working on, trying to do that. But specific to the domain of psychotherapy, we have rights, and Havoca.org says to have your therapist's undivided loyalty in relation to any and all perpetrators, abusers, or oppressors. So specific to the domain of psychotherapy, you have the right to, we as survivors of abuse have the right to our therapist's undivided loyalty in relation to any and all perpetrators, abusers, or oppressors. That's right. That's just really, I've actually seen this in my lifetime. I've actually had it happen to me where people have taken the side of my abusers. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. After what I've just told you, which is the truth and really can be backed up, that you would take my abuser's side on something, But many times people do. And they will try to take the side of the perpetrator of the abuse or the oppressors and make it look like, well, maybe you were doing something that was causing them to do that. And I'm like, maybe you're an abuser. Maybe you need to give your head a shake. Maybe are you an abuser too? Because only an abuser would think like that. Nobody deserves to be abused. You could never do anything, ever. See, as a child, remember this, people. If you're a survivor of abuse, it was not our fault. It was not our fault. It was not my fault that my parents chose to abuse me, that my brother chose to sexually abuse me, that my parents abused me physically and in every other way, psychologically, emotionally. No, it was not my fault. There was nothing I could have done that I could deserve to be abused like that. So to have a therapist kind of take the side of our abusers or our perpetrators is incredibly wrong. And society shouldn't be taking their side either. Abusers are abusers. Survivors of abuse are survivors of abuse. It's not the abusers who need the empathy and the support and the care and the concern. It's the survivors of the abuse, right? We're the ones that have been abused. So it's kind of like, be very careful with who you get involved with as far as sharing your information, and make sure that that person is emotionally well before you get involved with them, so that you can make sure that you're not being re-victimized, right? As a survivor of abuse, make sure get the information about re-victimization and really check it out. It's very, very important. Make sure you're not being re-victimized in this, because this is horrible. Personal Bill of Rights, number 27. This is Charles H. Whitfield, and he has a personal Bill of Rights. He's from his Healing the Child Within, and we are on number 27. And he says, I have the right to be flexible and be comfortable with doing so. So I can be flexible in my life. I don't have to be so rigid in everything. If I have to change an appointment, or I have to change something, or I have to change, a meeting arrangement, or if I just change my mind on something, I have the right to be flexible and be comfortable with doing so. It's my right, just like everybody else. They all think that they have the right to do that too, and they do. And so we do too. Everything that everybody else has a right to do, which is, to get the help we need, to get our needs met, and to assert ourselves in what our needs are, and to be, to be just as worthy as anybody else, just as flexible as anybody else in our daily life, we can be comfortable with doing that because we have the same rights, right? So this is very important for people to know, and we got to know what those rights are and remember them, right? And we're going to look at next up. I want to take a look at this containment boundaries. This is a Michael C. Irving. He's a P. He's a sculptor. He's a survivor himself, but he's a psychotherapist and a counselor. And he has a website there, irvingstudios.com, and that's it's also, you could just type in Child Abuse Survivor Monument, and that'll take you there too. He's got some great information there, and we're looking at containment and boundaries. And yesterday's was maintaining and managing boundaries is a normal and often spontaneous human activity that survivors of abuse can have difficulty with. So, he's talking about boundaries and containment, right? He's like having conscious boundaries is being able to know and decide when, where, and with whom you merge, right? It's also being able to determine and vary the degree of limits that you establish. And not being able to stand up for yourself, say no, or refuse to give over something you don't want to are all boundary issues, right? So he goes on to talk about this, and he says abuse destroys boundaries, right? And he says during child abuse, boundaries are totally ignored, violated, and shattered. To survive abuse, you had to dissociate from any sense of boundary. As the deadening response to abuse became habitual, you missed out on developing the inner sense of boundaries, and you did not pick up the lessons that healthy role models in your world displayed. So part of the healing and coping process for survivors of abuse is to reconnect with the inner sense of boundary. To learn ways to give yourself boundaries and let others know what your boundaries are is a difficult but vital task. Boundary work is very important, and I know I've done a lot of work in boundary work. I'm sure I still have more work to do. I could spend my whole life on it, I'm sure. Just knowing what I need, what my boundaries are, and what I will allow in my life, what I won't allow in my life. I've actually set some real I guess permanent boundaries, and that is that I won't allow anybody to abuse me anymore, and I won't allow abusive people in my life, and I won't allow violent people in my life. This kind of stuff, I've made some real boundaries, but I'm sure there's other subtle boundaries that I still need to work on. And when a boundary has been crossed, I mean, really, when we're growing up abused, by somebody, whether we grow up completely abused our whole lives, which I did, but some people may have just at some point a boundary was crossed between an individual who abused them, and that boundary, then is destroyed, right? It's totally ignored, it's violated and shattered, right? I mean, I didn't have the right to my own body. I didn't have the right to say no, right? And as survivors of abuse, that's the case. And even if I did say no, it wouldn't have made any difference. And I did say no, and it didn't help. It didn't make any difference. And the abuse just continued on. And so, these boundaries are shattered, right? So then to survive the abuse, they said here, you had to dissociate from any sense of boundary. So because the boundaries being crossed, there's really nothing a child can do. Children are totally vulnerable. And so it's very important to get this information about boundaries. And he does a little bit of talking about this, but Robert Burney has a great bunch of information. Robert Burney, I think it's Joy to Me and You, or Joy to You and Me. Robert Burney, Burney. Check out his website. He's got great info there, as well as John Bradshaw has really good, interesting info in his books. He's got two books that I actually got: Homecoming, Healing the Inner Child Within, and then there's the other one that is Healing the Shame That Binds You. There's some interesting info in those two books about boundary work, right? And I did a lot of that. That's where I did the boundary work, was actually through those books, and it was very helpful to check out what are these boundaries that I need to work on, and what did I lose out on? what am I missing? From being abused as a child. And so it's very important to get that information. So we'll move on to a healing meditation quilt square from Child Abuse Survivor Monument, Michael C. Irving. This is creating safety and containment. So, we can rest and feel, safe, right, without pain inside our body, right? This would be sensing our body without pain, right? And we can imagine a safe room and where we're safe, right? And I hope that you're safe there today. We've got about a minute left here, and we'll pick up the rest of this tomorrow morning. I hope that you're safe there today, and I hope that you will make sure that you get some help. If you're being abused right now, you get some help. And abuse is actually a crime. It's a criminal offense, and you really should get. You need to get yourself to safety. If you're a survivor of abuse and you're just having a hard time and you can't cope, you need to call a crisis line. Make sure that you call somebody. You need to stick it out. And you deserve help. We all do, right? And we deserve to be here. We all do. And we did not deserve to be abused. None of us did. These are very truthful absolutes. And you make sure that you get some help. So if you're struggling and having a hard time and you got nobody to talk to, you call a crisis line. You call somebody. You you get some help, right? And do not allow yourself to struggle on your own with this. This is a horrific situation. I'm glad I reached out. Back in 2009, I reached out. I took a chance and I reached out, and all these hands came back to me to help me out. And I was so thankful. And I really wish that for you too. And I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Take good care of yourselves. Be really good to yourselves. Be kind to yourselves, loving to yourselves, and do something good for yourself today. And we'll talk to you tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.